So I'm going to put up on the screen, you name checked Justice Gorsuch. Back when I was in the White House, we did a murder board of Justice Gorsuch, which basically is a mock hearing, right? It's putting the nominee in front of, in this case, you can see Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, questioning him. And we ran through the process so that it was like the Senate hearing. The idea is to rattle the nominee, to make sure that, their views are questioned, that they're, in this case of Gorsuch, his understanding of the law, his previous cases, some of his personal information. Article 3 Project, I know, has been involved in the confirmation process. What are you guys doing to help facilitate the confirmation process and get the nominees ready?
Yeah, look, so first of all, I mean, Article 3 Project, my friend and colleague, Mike Davis there, we've been very active when it comes to phone to action there. So one of our biggest things is grassroots mobilization. So, back after Pete Hegseth, what was nominated in particular, Pete Hegseth, Kash, Patel, Tulsi, Gabbard, RFK, some of these Trump nominees that a lot of people in kind of the go along to get along circles there are not necessarily in love with there. Maybe some people coming from a bit more of the Chamber of Commerce wing there. Part of our goal is to just mobilize the grassroots there. So, I don't want to be too hard on certain senators, but just to kind of name one particular name, there were some rumblings that Senator Joni Ernst was not initially a huge fan of the Pete Hegseth pick. So, for instance, we would mobilize our grassroots supporters and basically, literally, get the phones. I mean, like physically call, Senator Ernst's office, other senators' office there. And I think that we've been remarkably successful there because based on what I can tell, I think that the current whip from Majority Leader Thune is looking pretty good for all these nominees. So the very first thing I think that we do at Article 3 Project is when it comes to phone to action. When it comes to the murder board itself there, we're working very closely with the people that are surrounding these nominees to prepare them, to try to prepare them for exactly what kind of questions they can expect at all of these Senate confirmation hearings there. It's obviously happening this week there. Hegseth, Pam Bondi, some of the very biggest picks in Donald Trump's cabinet are being voted on absolutely this week. We are very confident, based on the work that we have done, based on all the communications that we have had with folks in Capitol Hill offices, that these nominees are all going to get through and that Donald Trump is going to have the cabinet that he wants very, very soon here in short order.
Yeah, I think there's 12 plus nominees up on the Hill this week. If you had to rank who you thought the Democrats would go after the most, who would you put at like number 1 and 2?
I think Hegseth and RFK are probably the top two there. So from an RFK perspective, Sean, I think you cannot possibly underestimate the degree to which Democrats loathe a Kennedy who has now gone to the Trumpian side, so to speak there. I mean, there's a certain kind of sense of kind of like, oh, this guy's a sellout there. So I'm thinking that he's going to get a lot of heat probably from Democrats there. There frankly are probably a number of Republicans who are not in love with RFK Jr. as well for XYZ reasons, whether it's the right to life issue or other issues there. So I think that he's probably going to get it hard. Hegseth, I mean, you have not heard nearly as much about Pete as we heard back after he was first nominated, and they were trying to really very hard actually to do the whole Brett Kavanaugh information operation all over again. They were trying to call him a serial rapist, and he was an alcoholic, and he was this or that. That narrative, frankly, has kind of died, but it was so potent for a while there that I think you probably will see a lot of opportunists try to bring it back and try to make it a thing again, so to speak there. Again, I think all these nominees are relatively safe. I don't think any of them are going to fail there, but the margin will probably be at least closest when it comes to people like Hegseth, RFK Jr., maybe Tulsi Gabbard, maybe Kash Patel.
If you're going through this process and I'm having Josh Hammer help me get ready for my Senate hearing, how honest do you think these guys are with like stuff in their past, right? I think one of the misnomers about background checks as a guy who's had one for over 20 years is that they know everything about you. I mean, if there's an instance, let's just say Josh Hammer and I went to college together and one night there was some crazy incident, whatever, no one's going to find that out unless Josh Hammer tells them, right? I mean, and so how concerned should people be as they're going up through this process about stuff that maybe they did in college or happened in their personal life or some domestic dispute that occurred with a former girlfriend or boyfriend, etc.?
Look, I when you are eligible for an executive branch position, there is an extraordinarily detailed and thorough questionnaire. I mean, there are various things that you have to fess up to and cop to there. And, if you're not being honest, then ultimately the onus is on you. I mean, you should be ready, willing, and able to have an answer to essentially everything in your life. Now, fortunately, the American people are ultimately a forgiving people. I mean, no one, Sean. I mean, human beings are made in God's image, Genesis 1:27, but we are not God. I mean, we are all figures here who do our own wrongs and commit our own sins, God forbid, on a day-to-day life here. But thankfully, we have repentance and atonement, and I think that is basically kind of the optics that some of these nominees ought to have when some of these more uncomfortable questions come up there. Obviously, on the other hand, there's all sorts of fabrications that maybe have kind of a small kernel of truth and then are taken just to ridiculous extremes. So again, Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing in 2018 would be a very good example. I mean, did Brett Kavanaugh enjoy some beers at some Maryland summertime parties when he was a teenager? Probably, right? But does that necessarily lead, obviously, to Christine Blasey Ford? No, obviously it does not there. So, right. So, I mean, part of the challenge is distinguishing between, maybe an indiscretion that you made 20, 30 years ago, and then kind of acknowledging that and saying, I've learned from my mistakes, I've done X, Y, Z things, and then not indulging and then taking it and taking an inch and then taking it a mile or 5, 10, 20 miles, as the case may be.
So if I'm preparing for my hearing, I'm going through one of these murder boards, and you start questioning me. And I say, you say, oh, was there an incident in college where, blah, blah, blah. And I say during my practice session with Josh Hammer, yeah, I did this event. There was this incident back when I was 25 years old, and this is what happened, and blah, 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 blah. Could they subpoena you and say, I want to get his, I mean, do those folks have to worry when they're going through these practice sessions that information is subpoenable?
I mean, Congress's subpoena jurisdiction is very broad. I mean, it's close to plenary. Actually, this is one of the most powerful tools that Congress has in its entire arsenal. So in theory, would that be subject jurisdiction-wise to a congressional subpoena? Sure, but it's not exactly a pressing worry that I think anyone here involved in the in these murder board prep or anything is particularly thinking about either. There, I can't think of a precedent for it happening before. But more to the point, John, Republicans control. I mean, right? I mean, right now Republicans control both chambers of Congress. So they're not going to use the subpoena power against their own people that are trying to help get their own people confirmed either.
Is there a senator on the left, each of these nominees goes before the committee of jurisdiction, right? So Pete Hegseth will go to the Senate Armed Services Committee. Doug Burgum will go up to the Energy Committee, right? Lee Zeldin will go in front of the Environment and Public Works Committee. Among the Dem senators, is there one that you think you might be worried about in terms of how effective they are in pressing a witness? They always used to go to Kamala Harris and somehow when she was in the Senate and say, man, she really held judicial nominees to which I never actually agreed with. But is there one Dem that you would say, hey, on the Republican side, you might want to keep an eye out for so-and-so?
I mean, there's really no one who's leaping off the page who's come immediately to mind, to be fully honest with you. I mean, maybe Chris Coons of Delaware, who I suppose is one of these smarter Democrat senators, or at least he's operating at a slightly higher intellectual plane than, for example, a Mazie Hirono or someone like that. Maybe 10 years ago, maybe I would have said Dick Durbin, but Dick Durbin's lost a lot of miles per hour on his fastball, so to speak. Every so often, Dick Blumenthal of Connecticut is able to kind of string together a coherent form of questions. He has a legal career, former prosecutor as well. So that he's someone I think that is definitely worth keeping an eye on as well. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, I guess, former Harvard law professor. I mean, she's obviously very far left wing there, but, she's clearly someone who is not stupid. I mean, she is able to, I think, to kind of get there in the weeds sometimes as well there. But there's really no one who's kind of leaping off the page come immediately to mind. You're totally right that Kamala Harris used to play that role. Go back and rewatch the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Kamala Harris really was probably the Democrats' #1 attack dog. Cory Booker, by the way, was also a major attack dog during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings there, but you really don't hear a whole lot about Cory Booker these days. I'm frankly not that worried about him.
During President Trump's first term, I think he did one of his biggest legacies, as far as I'm concerned, and as I said, I'm not a lawyer, was how he remade the federal judiciary with real good, solid, conservative judges at every level of the federal bench. It seems like, from what I've read, that opportunity is not going to be as rampant as it was because there's not as many vacancies. Is that accurate?
It's quasi-accurate. I would say it's half accurate. So, I mean, look,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a very lawyerly answer, right? I mean, look, maybe the #1 reason, One of the top reasons, I don't want to say the number one, but one of the top reasons that Donald Trump, I think, was able to defeat Hillary Clinton in 2016 was the fact that there was a vacant U.S. Supreme Court seat, right? I mean, the fact that Anthony Scalia's seat was kept open, it was one of the most miraculous plays that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Grassley have ever done. Truly, it was just an astounding procedural feat that they were able to keep that seat open for as long as they did there. I mean, that was a big deal. I mean, that was one of Donald Trump's very first moves, obviously. I mean, you were there, Sean. I mean, Neil Gorsuch, I mean, that was a day one priority there. That day one priority at SCOTUS obviously does not exist this time around. Look, if I'm putting on my tea leaves, my prognostication cap, I do think that Donald Trump is going to end up with at least one, likely multiple U.S. Supreme Court nominations to fill. I'm not confident in this, but I will predict on your show that I do think Sam Alito is probably going to resign after this term is over. This is kind of a logical time to do so with a Republican president, with a Republican Senate there before the midterm elections next year. And this I'm less confident of. But I am willing to predict as well that I think Clarence Thomas will probably resign as well. And then other seats, who knows? I mean, health issues.
But those would be trades, right? So you're getting, I mean, those are solid guys. So you'd be swapping them out for another solid conservative. We're not picking up, and we're not making more ground up on the court when it comes to the current makeup, ideological makeup.
They're the two best. From my perspective, they're the two best justices on the court. They're fantastic. I mean, you really can't ask to do any better. At the same time, they're in their mid-70s, and it might be better to try and get some younger reinforcements, assuming that those reinforcements will be even close, frankly, to as good as those are. Sotomayor, Jackson, Kagan, they're obviously not going to resign under Donald Trump. Who knows what might happen for health reasons. John Roberts has had some health issues over the years, incidentally, and he's stuck around now for 2 decades since he was made Chief Justice by George W. Bush there, but he has had some on and off health issues. That's the wild card to me. I would not be shocked if John Roberts were to actually resign somewhat prematurely over the next few years. I'm not going to predict it, but it would not thoroughly shock me. That could be a genuine pickup because Roberts, of course, is the swing vote on this current court there. If we get kind of a more aggressive conservative originalist type constitutionalist there, that would be a genuine improvement over John Roberts. As far as the lower courts are concerned there, it's true based on the numbers that I've seen that there are there are fewer day one vacancies available for Donald Trump there, but those things sometimes just take time. Frankly, to me, Sean, that was maybe Donald Trump's number one legacy from his first term. The SCOTUS justices, he got 3 there, but really the lower courts, he was hitting home run after home run after home run there. I mean, I personally benefited. I clerked on the 5th Circuit for Judge Jim Ho, who's a Trump nominee. I saw with my own eyes, literally on the 1 year I clerked, I literally saw how that court transformed from a center-right court to a firm constitutionalist conservative court. I saw it with my own eyes there. We have a chance in this term, I think, to possibly take back the 9th Circuit. Based in California, it's been kind of the bane of conservatives' existence for 3 to 4 decades there. That is a not crazy proposition that could potentially happen there, and I'm very excited for that.
Oh, that actually got me excited. As a non-lawyer, I think that's awesome. Josh Hammer, congrats on the new book. As I said, the link are in the show description on YouTube and Rumble. Look forward to having you back soon, and I appreciate all your insight on these issues.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it.
You bet. All right, guys, Ryan Fournier is on tomorrow. We're going to talk about the TikTok ban. We're going to get some updates on what's been happening at Mar-a-Lago with all these members of Congress. I've got a lot of great content in my weekly newsletter. It's free. Always welcome you being a VIP member. Go to SeanSpicer.com. Got a ton of information on the inauguration, on getting jobs in the Trump-Vance administration, and behind-the-scenes photos about what's happening. SeanSpicer.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.